Attendees are looking for something innovative.
40% of attendees said they had a real peak moment, even though 80% of organizers thinks they delivered a peak moment.
I'll just say that I'm on a list that when presidents are in a building, the Secret Service.
All right, well, I'm really excited to have you here today, Ken. You announced live at IMEX yesterday a trend report for this quarter that Freeman puts out every quarter with some incredible content. And I really wanted to take a little bit of a deep dive today into some of that content with you. So excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Before I dive into all the nitty gritty, give me the high level, 30-second version of what your report encompassed and the big picture takeaway that we should all make sure we capture.
Yeah, so for a little bit of background, Freeman Trends Report we do almost quarterly, as you mentioned. This year, starting at IMEX last year, we really found that as we uncovered various things of generational shifts and where the industry needed to go, that meeting planners said, we understand we need to make change, but we don't feel empowered to do it.
Yeah.
And so we set out this year to unpack what we call our excellence framework, experience, learning, networking, and commerce. This one is on experience. We've already unpacked networking and commerce. I know it wasn't straight in order.
It's okay.
But the experiential one, we really wanted to wait for IMEX because of the nature of the planners and what happens here. We actually collaborated with IMEX on researching them. And so the high-level takeaway is that we went into it wanting to quantify what do attendees particularly mean when they want to have a good experience at an event. How do they measure it? What does that look like through their eyes? And then how do we compare that to us in the meetings industry? And are we looking in a mirror, or are we really looking out at the audience and understanding them? And
I think that my biggest takeaway when I read the report was that there is a very big differentiator between what the organizers think and what the attendee thinks in a lot of different categories. So one of the categories that I saw was the 40% of attendees said they had a real peak moment, even though 80% of organizers thinks they delivered a peak moment. Tell me about a peak moment, what that gap is all about, and I want to deep dive on that first.
Yeah, so as data geeks, we look to try to prove out various things, and brand statements are one of them. Last report, we proved out Freeman has a brand statement that's connecting people in meaningful ways. And then we also have a brand statement that's used, a 100-year-old company, we've got a couple, that is making moments that matter.
Yeah.
So we said, what does that mean to an attendee? And so that's the what you're getting at. We asked them, did they experience a peak or memorable moment at an event? And if so, what was it? What did they remember about it? And what would they do with that information? And then we asked the planners, do you think your attendees experienced a peak moment? And that's where the gap came in.
Okay. And so are there any specific examples of those peak moments that you've heard people talk about, or maybe you've seen even live to say, this is what they delivered and this is what the attendee experience feedback was? So
I'll take you on a weird little side note on that. We all want to talk about what AI is doing in the space, and it's a topic of the day. We actually used AI in this report to try to prove out what could we do practically with it. Normally when you do research, you give them a list of choices. You say, what does a meaningful moment mean? And you'd say, choose one of these.
Choose A, B, C.
And as a researcher, we know that can bias. So we rotate and we try to do large enough samples. This time we said, let's take an AI plug-in with our research partner and actually let them say whatever they want, fully anecdotal, which you would never do in a normal research report. But we were able to go through tone and text and look at the responses and say, how do we actually take this qualitative feedback and actually really quantify the measurement? Why is that important? Because what they came back with is they said over and over again that what they meant by memorable moments were tied to some pretty basic stuff. The learning, the networking, and commercial aspects. I met with a vendor that identified a new product that I'm excited about. I met someone that I think could be a mentor for my career. I learned something unique in a collaborative roundtable with other. And so all of those bubble up to the learning, the networking. What they didn't say was an amazing award ceremony or dinner or
a big entertainer,
or any of that. But yet that's what the organizers said. The organizers said, what do you think they're going to... We did, a couple of years ago, we asked the attendees, who do you want as a keynote speaker? Because we all have opinions, right?
Sure.
And we all love a good celebrity keynote, particularly planners. We get to go backstage and we get
that personalized meet and greet moment.
Yeah, nothing like meeting our heroes. less than 1% of attendees came back and said that they wanted a celebrity speaker. In fact, they were negative about it.
Yes.
They felt like that planners were using money where they shouldn't. The only thing that scored lower were award ceremonies. So it's always one of those where we always love an award ceremony if we or a colleague are getting an award,
right?
But that really kind of began this journey of trying to figure out then what do they want? Well, they want inspiration. That was one of them.
Okay.
But the major thing, they want to hear from industry peers.
Yep.
And they want some sort of clear information transfer. So how does that wrap into this conversation about spending? The majority of the time, it's not just the really amazing audiovisual that goes into a keynote space, et cetera. It can just be those honorariums, those speaker fees that they're paying that could equal half of the budget for the general session, right?
Right.
And I think it's one of those where I'll use a joke because I'm a fan, but he joked about it. President Obama was asked to be at a software company, and he kind of looks at the interviewer and he's like, "Man, I don't know why I'm here, but somebody told me I'm supposed to be SaaS," and he's software as a service,
Yes.
right? And he's like, I'm going to talk about policy. Is that okay? And the whole audience, of course, they'd laugh. But the big thing was, it wasn't that the room wasn't full. When the 1%, it's not like people are saying, I'm going to not go to the keynote. They'll show up, but they're not getting on an airplane for that. They're not getting on an airplane for Tuesday morning yoga. They're not getting on an airplane for the fun run. They're not getting on an airplane for your keynote speaker. And there's been a myth in the industry that we have to use those moments to attract. That's what's going to get the reg across the line.
Right.
And we proved that it does.
Which is so interesting because, everyone that I'm talking to right now, even, my clients that are the decision makers on these meetings are saying for their own personal time and when they get invited to things, they want peer-to-peer. They want peer-to-peer interaction, and they want peer-to-peer with people that are of, the same playing field as they're on. They don't want to be told it's peer-to-peer and then being put with some people that are maybe more junior than they are, right? So I think it's been really interesting to talk about what does even that peer-to-peer moment mean and how can we create those experiences that are engaging, because those are experiences too. Right? And those experiences aren't necessarily in a trade show booth. They're not necessarily in a traditional social event. They're walking in the foyer when you have this little moment of activation that drives a conversation, right? Or they're making, instead of a general session, it's a speed dating session, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know what you're seeing on that.
So we played off of this a little bit. In the last report, I called it architecting serendipity, which is intentionally ironic, right?
Absolutely.
You have to design it. And the biggest thing that we saw is that all the moments you just talked about, we often as planners don't leave room for them.
Right.
So,
or budget
serendipity in the bathroom line is not what we're going for, or the food line, or any other line.
Yeah.
We want to have room. And so they say that a lot of this research, experiential, networking, et cetera, is grounded in our generational research.
Yeah.
So we know that there's a generational shift happening.
100%.
The boomers are retiring quickly. It's the biggest shift we've seen in the industry. We've seen almost a 12-year drop in average age of attendees over the last 5 years. That's never happened. All of those things are the backdrop.
Right.
So when it comes to connecting peer-to-peer, we have a generation, Gen Z particularly, but millennials. First of all, those groups actually outstrip attendance now at events. They're the largest groups.
Yes.
And they want something different. They are at an age where they are looking for what I would call career insurance, right? That peer-to-peer, that mentorship is whether they have worked remotely and they've been disadvantaged a little bit by those types of connections. We find that I love to work remotely, but am I in the office politics, right?
Right.
Coming face-to-face at events drives that. And in fact, they show us that the more time they spend online, the more they actually crave in person. The New York Times showed that the number one group that's using AI tools, et cetera, young millennials and Gen Z, but the ones that trust it the least, same audience. They don't trust it. So in person is where the trust comes in. And that's where the peer-to-peer anchors. I don't want to meet someone behind the thumbs. I want to meet them face to face.
Right.
I want to look not only above to mentors, but also to peers to connect and collaborate, because we all know that we can look back on moments in our career, transitions and things, and know how important that network was. But a boomer or an older Xer like me coming to an event, we're meeting with our tribe. We're figuring out who's going to be there that I know.
That I already know.
We're going to have dinner. We're going to have connections. And that disconnect has just gotten really loud in the last few years as we see this big drop in age. So very practical, but I think getting the noise out of the way, making space for it, not just the space in the schedule, which is the first thing they ask for, but physical space, making sure that it can be everything from just wider aisles or pre-function areas that are a little more. I was at an event yes, I was at an event where the building was like, look how amazing this is. These people were like sitting out here on the floor eating lunch. They're so excited to be here. I'm like, they don't look excited.
They have nowhere else to sit.
They're sitting on the floor. That is not winning.
Yeah.
Let's figure out a better option here for that, because that's not what they're looking for.
So let's take it a step further, because, Event Planner Confessions, we're powered by Cohera. So we are really
congratulations.
Thank you. We're really taking the idea of the traditional DMC and kind of flipping it on its head a little bit. We're larger than, traditional DMC. We cover more destinations, but we're much more of a creative agency from a thought process standpoint. So what's, in your opinion, where do you see the DMC space or the partnership look like for clients to use DMCs or, real creative agency style DMCs in, obtaining some of these objectives and, shortening these gaps that are existing between the perception and reality? Yeah,
I think DMCs and destinations particularly have a unique role to play in attracting audiences. First of all, you'll find that it's reinventing perhaps a space that people think they're associated with. They know the headquarter hotel, they know the building, but what about areas in the building that haven't been used before, or unique, speakeasies, or things that are going to connect? But also even looking at the environment, the neighborhood. That's a big piece of what we've shown in the research, and practically that I did an event recently where they actually put different groups, almost personas, in various kind of boutique hotels around the venue. And it took on its own personality. The bar scene at night was really curated because the people in that hotel, and you need people on the ground that understand what's going on in that scene and how they can actually utilize spaces that others hadn't thought of. And I talk a lot to cities and buildings, and I'll talk about, it's cheesy, but moving from facility to facilitate, right? And I think that's the core, as you guys partner with the buildings and the hospitality brands, coming together to say, not only what does these new audiences want, but what's worked well over here. We often have sat back with tell us what you want. In our industry, we're very good at grabbing a clipboard in the days and taking a list, but coming forward and saying, when this meeting was here 2 weeks ago, they did this and it worked really well, or we tried this new thing,
right?
Because the rinse and repeat could get too much, but you also have some things that worked with the different group that could work differently,
right?
And I think that's the biggest thing that we see, whether it's experience or any of these other components we're talking about. Attendees are looking for new, they're looking for something innovative, they're looking for they want to be kind of curated in their discovery. The days of surprise me, those are there, but there's a bit of let me plan ahead, whether it's my anxiety, whether it's my just the way that the buying cycle has changed and they want to meet differently. All of those things can be brought into the environment and into the creative. Most importantly, though, making sure when we identify that, and I think that's where the report we just released ties down, what are their core objectives? Are we meeting those table stakes? Then how do we bring on the X factor, the experiential, to influence those things? And that can be done through spaces, through food, through the locations, the uniqueness of that, and all of those things come together
and those little
in
cultural
understanding
moments that you're bringing to life in a destination that are driving some conversation. And
my city has the largest Basque population outside of Spain. So I'm in Boise, Idaho.
Okay,
and it'd be terrible to go to our city and not go to the block next over and experience the culture that community has brought, or other immigrant communities in and around our space. And our planners, our destination partners understand that and bring that culture to life, and attendees love it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that those are like the memorable moments too, that they don't typically think about because you're so focused on what's that big content, that big message that I'm trying to get across on the main stage. But they're actually learning more from that moment sometimes than they are from the main stage to your point earlier. So
I think that it's a partnership between the planner and all of the community around them. Of truly, I would just use the word curate.
You're
curating everything. You're setting it up and saying these are the moments, these are the things that matter. The planner brings their theme, and you can play that out. Can make sure that there's connections of different sizes that really bring life.
Because we very often get the ask, we want to do something that's never been done before. We want a wow moment, right? Like all those lines you've heard a million times, right? And we have these creative libraries full of really great things that exist, but we want to curate those libraries to your audience and your message and your purpose, right?
That personalization is what we're going to be using AI for over and over, right? Taking those libraries, personalizing them in powerful ways.
Exactly, and using that and tying it all together in a way that is creating an impact for you, but also really that's not just trying to create a never before moment, because it doesn't have to be never before, it just has to be never before to your audience, right? And I think that's sometimes where people get tied up. It's like, you don't want us to do something that's never before been done. It might get shut down by the government. It may get, there's all these things that could
it's
happen.
Balancing that.
So let's find a way to do it that works.
It's a challenging balance between new and nostalgia, and we have to balance those things. Some of the nostalgia in culture, and some of the nostalgia even on, there are things that we see work, but the hardest thing we do as planners in our community is really, we like to add, we don't like to subtract. I love to cook. I trained as a chef when I was a kid. And really, really great food is about pulling ingredients out and simplifying and keeping it basic. And I think as planners, we can learn a lot from the Gordon Ramsay approach to meeting planning, which is cut the menu, narrow it down, and make it really, really curated and simplified.
And then that be really hospitable along
that. Absolutely.
Yep, I totally agree. Is there any other big hot topic or big message that you wanted to share with our audience today before we move on to our confession? Yeah, a couple of things. I think take a dive through the research. We really have made that an open experience for the community to take a look at. I think a lot of people will read into it what they want, but I think getting back to that core, what is the attendee's objective? It's really the core of engagement. And engagement is about really two parties coming together that agree on an upfront contract, and look at it through those lenses first, not our own biases, and say, okay, am I meeting their core objectives, and how would they tell me that it can be measured? Am I asking them up front, or am I asking them questions that benefit me? I want to know. Yes, exactly.
Yes, cut down your reg questions, but add reg questions that are custom for the attendee. And then ask them later, did we accomplish those things? Don't ask them a question that's just, would you recommend me to elsewhere? But did you meet your learning goal? Did you meet and connect with people? Because in the rising costs right now, we need to lower customer acquisition. And customer acquisition right now, retention across the industry is only 30% of first-time attendees. Wow. With the generational shift of retirement, that's a math problem. We better figure out how to raise it. This report says not only back to the beginning question on memorable moments, but it comes back and says when they experienced a memorable moment, they said that they were 85% more likely to return to an event. That blows it away, right?
That's incredible.
Give me a memorable moment. I will come back.
I will come back. I will probably spend more. I will engage more. I will do all of the things.
You want to lower costs? Serve up their objectives. That's what they're telling us.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome. All right. Before we close out today, do you have an event planner confession you're willing to share with us? Okay. So you prepped me for this, and I've been thinking through it. So here's a fun one, and this is going to be a little bit interesting. I'll just say that I'm on a list that when presidents are in a building, the Secret Service checks me out ahead of time. And it was clear back to my beginning days of doing audiovisual in the event space. I was doing an event in Dallas during the 2000 election season. President Clinton at the time is stumping for Al Gore, and there's an event in Dallas, and we set up our projectors as one does. Of course, these projectors are the size of a table and require their own power grid to power them up. This is a long time ago. You're dating yourself. I'm dating myself. These projectors had lamps in them that literally had to spark to start, and it was like this crazy moment to get them bright enough. President Clinton gets on stage. He doesn't even raise his hand to greet the audience, and one of the projectors exploded. One of the lamps
just blew up. Just kaboom, smoke coming out of the back.
Have gone
President
nuts.
Clinton his feet didn't touch the ground. The Secret Service had him off the stage.
Oh my God.
He's literally taken off at Love Field by the time we figure out that it was a projector lamp. And my staff and I were I was the lead on the meeting, and we were there till about 3 a.m, convincing the Secret Service that a bomb did not go off inside of that projector. It was just the lamp, I swear, but it disintegrates. So there's no evidence left. Total accident. And I'm on a list because of it.
Oh my God,
So
and they've literally investigated you since.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I had a recent event, and they're like, Mr. Holsinger, we need to have a conversation with you about an incident. And it was in Dallas. I was back to Dallas for another event.
Maybe that's why you're on a higher list in Dallas.
I might be, yeah. That's something to think about. So, yeah.
Maybe we'll think twice
Thanks
before inviting you to Dallas.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I just think that your data speaks volumes and is really important for our industry. So thank you for what you're doing and for taking the time to be with us today.
Well,
we really
thank you.
appreciate
And
it.
congratulations on the new brand and the launch.
Awesome.
Good luck with that.
Awesome.